Amazing, yeah, thank you. Cool. So yeah, just to go over for anyone who wasn't in here a minute ago, I've just put a Slido link in the chat. I'll do it again for anyone who wasn't here. So any questions that arise while we're talking today, please put them in there, and those will sort of be followed up after the session, and you can get some answers and some feedback from the Mental Wellbeing Committee after today. But yeah, I guess with that, we've only got 25 minutes now, so I'll jump into the first question. So simply, Gemma,
Hi.
What is stress and why do we get stressed?
Okay, so stress comes from, originally, if you're thinking about it in a sort of evolutionary perspective or biological perspective, like what really is the point? It's about the fight or flight response, which you probably have heard of, and it's igniting all that adrenaline. So you'll probably notice when you get stressed, you might have some of these sort of symptoms of ulcers, you might get kind of sweaty palms, you might sweat a bit, you might even get something kind of like hives, which can be quite a severe response with your immune system. I think sleep can often be a really difficult one, and sleep is a really hard one because it is one of the only anxieties which is self-fulfilling. I get lots of people with, and it's very common in anxiety, that you get anxious about your anxiety, or you get stressed about your stress. And sleep is one of those really annoying ones where you get really anxious about not sleeping, and then because you're getting anxious, it therefore happens and you don't sleep very well. And then, often that's because our thoughts that we kind of aren't addressing in the day, or maybe we are addressing too much in the day, they just creep in whenever they can. But going back to the fight or flight, so it's all about kind of saving ourselves in those situations where we think that we might be under threat. So alertness, sweating, avoidance behaviors, that kind of feeling of wanting to give up, that's often associated with the flight thing, wanting to run away, wanting to give up. And the fight, you might notice that you get angry, or you get a bit irritable or restless. But that is essentially why we get stressed. And obviously we're not fighting bears anymore, but actually our jobs mean a lot to us. And so it's quite important that we do something about it when we feel that there might be a threat involved.
And in terms of doing stuff about it, are there simple tips? Can we kind of, as simple as making stress go away?
I don't know if you can really make it go away, but you can definitely manage stress. And also some of that can be sort of preemptive. So it doesn't have to be a reactive thing. Obviously, that does rely on you noticing that you're stressed to be reactive. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this in particular, but I do think it can be really helpful. But that's mindfulness and meditation. And, it's so helpful because if you can just sort of quieten down the what ifs, because the anxiousness and the stress often lives in the future and worrying about what's going to happen or what might happen. But these techniques, the mindfulness and meditation, they really bring us back to the now. And so even if I actually really struggle with both of these things, but I really like them as a concept, but I'm too fidgety to really kind of do them effectively. But if I put some practice in, I might be able to. But it's just like even as simple as, I'm really worried about what might happen in the next, well, actually, you know what, with this presentation, this could all go tits up and I could make a fool of myself. But right now, hopefully it's all okay. I mean, I'm in my house, I'm warm, I'm safe, I can put my feet on the ground. There's nothing really actually happening. Even though I might be feeling a bit stressed, it's okay. And so I think just really honing in on the present and just acknowledging that right now everything is fine. There's some real good breathing techniques, just to really simply breathe in, count to 5, breathe out, count to 5. Do that for a few minutes, and that tricks the parasympathetic nervous system into believing that actually you are safe. So even though your body and your mind are all going, oh my God, what's going to happen? That can be really helpful. That is really simple. And the other things that people often talk about is self-care. And self-care is something you kind of do have to put a bit of work into. And I'm going to make a distinction between self-care and joy, because there are types of things we can do that are good for us, but actually they take work, like the mindfulness, maybe like the exercise. And then there are some things that can be quite nice for us. So when it comes to self-care, I often think or I talk to my clients about it like this, I'll kind of think, imagine you're your own child. How would you treat that child? Would you, if you were really stressed, would you say, you know, if your child was going, oh, I really need to get that done by the end of the day, but I haven't got time. I know what, I think I'll just push through. I'll work till 10, and I won't have time to make dinner, but I'll get a takeaway. What do I fancy? Oh, I might just get a McDonald's. Yeah, and then I might just like binge watch something for a few hours and just make sure I go to sleep at 1. You know, you wouldn't do that to your child. Like, that's not how you would probably want to raise your child. So I think that can be a really helpful thing to do for yourself. Just a bit like remembering to nurture yourself. And just touching on the joy thing, we need that. We need the bit that's indulgent. And like, if you read these articles that are about the most successful entrepreneurs or whatever, and they're like, oh, I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I do my yoga and I have my granola bar and my smoothie and then I do some meditation. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay, great, good for you. But where are they doing anything that's actually fun and you can let your hair down? I think that is so important, because if we don't balance that stuff out, then we're just machines. We're just going to be keeping going and going and going. I just think that's a really important distinction to make. So it's good to kind of check in with yourself. What am I actually doing for fun? I know that's really hard this year, but like just simply like socializing can be something. You might have to get a bit creative with that, but hopefully from Monday it'll be a bit easier. And again, exercise, and it can sound a bit like, obviously everyone's saying just you've got to go out and exercise, but no, you really do, because your physiology talks to your psychology, and if your body is just sitting still for days on end, then it's going to trick your mind into doing the same thing, and you're going to feel lethargic mentally as well as physically. And you know, getting green space as well is really beneficial. There's tons of studies about how just having a bit of green around you, some plants, just going out to the parks can be really, really revitalizing, really remedial.
Yeah, I think definitely that sort of that idea of self-care and that idea of living in the now is something that speaks, you know, especially in the kind of line of work that we do. There's a lot of deadlines, a lot of clients to manage, a lot of relationships to manage, and we often talk about striving for this sort of perfect work-life balance, sometimes without kind of necessarily knowing what that is, what it looks like, what it feels like. Do you have any practical tips you can give to kind of help us get closer to this elusive work-life balance?
Yeah, and I think my key word here will be boundaries, which you may or may not have come across before, but I bang on about them all the time. They're so important, and it's about really what is okay for you and what isn't okay for you. And I think I was talking to you about this last week, wasn't I? But this work-life balance as a concept is kind of strange, because like, you have work and then you have life. No, you don't really. You have life, and then within it you have work. And so I think it's a bit of a weird thing to think that you have to do one or the other. So I think it's more of a question of how do you want work to fit in with your life? And I was thinking about this, and I think with boundaries, the best way of really setting them is when actually you've kind of done it well on a day. So maybe you've had a good week, or maybe you've had a really good couple of days. We've just thought, I think I've sussed that. That's really good. I'm quite pleased with that. You know, I actually turned my computer screen off at 6, or I actually did go out for lunch, or whatever it is that is appropriate for you. But remember that and take note of that and set your boundaries then. And so it's about kind of thinking, how would I like my life to look? How would I like my day to look? On the small scheme of things, on the big scheme of things, do I want to be a person that really kills themselves to reach work deadlines? You know, just, yeah, have a think about that and take ownership of your time. I think that's really important. Intentionality.
Yeah, I think the real sticking point there that you've just touched on can sometimes be coping with kind of an overwhelming workload. You know, we might get to the end of the day and we think, you know, I should be switching off here. I know I should be switching off here, but I can't afford to switch off here. I've got stuff to do, and we end up working extra hours. And then even if we are turning off at 5:30, like we're meant to, we're then thinking, well, I should be staying longer to do that work. I have work to do, and it kind of negatively impacts what's meant to be our kind of our time away from it. Is there anything you could speak to, in terms of dealing with that?
Yeah, well, what I can really hear in your question there is there's this real sort of balance between, do I do this thing that is good for me, or do I do the thing that is good for my work? But it's not just work, is it? It's about the people that are involved. And I can understand, and from my own experience as well, it's like if you put stuff down, then maybe someone else will have to pick that up, and then you feel guilty about that, or you feel like, actually, if I'm struggling, then they're going to be struggling too, so it's just not acceptable. But I think, you know, if you can use that actually to think, we are a team here. We're a team on the big sense of we're a company, and then we're a team within your, you know, your actual teams that you're sitting in. But you have to really look after all of the components of that team. You need to make sure that you're all in good working order. Otherwise, the whole thing won't work, won't function very well. And I think that, you know, I'm talking about it like a machine here, but you really are humans. And yeah, you're workers. We're all workers, but you're humans. And I think remembering that, being human to human, and also opening up when you feel like your workload is too much and you can't handle it. Every now and then, maybe it's fine, like, you know, once a month or whatever's okay for you, but opening up to somebody and you're just acknowledging it and talking to somebody about it. And kind of on that note, talking about when you're feeling a bit anxious or a bit stressed in any capacity, even just like a little glimmer, you know, just if you're talking on Slack or something like that, and just saying, oh, I'm having a really hard day, actually, I'm just really stressed. It can also open up for that person, the other person, to talk about it. And, you know, you don't have to go into tons of detail about what's going on, but being there for other people, listening, empathizing, really trying to understand what's really going on for them, and validating their stress, validating their feelings, going, God, yeah, that does sound really rough. You can all help each other with that.
I think that openness is really, really crucial. I think that kind of touches perfectly on our next question, in terms of sometimes I think it can be tough for people to be that open, especially if you're maybe a more senior member of the company, or you have certain responsibilities. I guess in a managerial sense, you know, you know, part of my role is to look after this person, and if they're seeing me, you know, not being able to look after myself in a sense, how's that going to affect me? So, is there anything you could say to how to kind of have that self-care while also having that care over others, either within a team or like I say, in a managerial sense?
Yeah, I think there are two things. So I think, one, I think you'd be surprised at how okay it is to show your vulnerability, even if you're a manager. Just like if you're a parent, it can actually be a really good thing to model to your children that you aren't actually invincible. You can still hold the group, you can still hold your people that you manage, but being invincible isn't necessary. I do obviously think there is a line if you're going through a bit of a crisis, something that's really overwhelming, something that probably is more suited to talk to your family members or your best friend about, or something like that, then maybe there's a line there. But I think it really is about understanding that you can support each other. It doesn't really matter what role you take. And meanwhile, respecting people's boundaries, because there will be people that will share an awful lot more, and also share what you feel comfortable with. But I'm just sort of challenging that assumption there.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've just said it, encouraging that openness and that idea of not being invincible is a real huge one that I know a lot of people can struggle with a lot of the time. And now I guess it wouldn't be any type of Q&A in the last year without asking a question about working from home. Luckily enough, I guess Incubeta, you know, a lot of us are able to go back into the office from Monday, but even then, you know, we're at limited capacity. We're still going to have the majority of people seeing them through a screen. And one of the things that, you know, people were touching on in their responses to our survey was that being at home can sometimes kind of make people worried that they're not doing enough, because they can't see how much work other people are doing. They can't see how often other people are at their desk, and struggle to get a sense also of kind of what is expected of them from managers or from peers or whatever it might be. What would you kind of say to that?
Yeah, I really feel that, because I actually used to experience this so much when I worked from home for a different company. What I would say about that is, have a think about what your kind of capacity is. What can you do? I would say maybe even thinking quite pragmatically along the lines of setting yourself some objectives for the day, and also not comparing. But I think what typically happens is people compare with an idea of what's going on. So, usually in the office, you'd sit and you'd look around and be like, okay, well, everyone else is leaving at 5, so I'm going to leave at 5, or everyone else is going to get teas and coffees all the time, so it's all right. And or the opposite, it might be that everyone else is, beavering down and not getting up, so I should probably do the same. And we actually have that direct comparison, whereas working from home, we don't have that visual. So we are a lot of the time assuming. Top tip for the day: challenge every assumption. We're assuming what other people are doing, and that's never a good idea. So really work out what's your capacity, set some objectives. I would also, again, encouraging communication. Don't be afraid to ask for a review or like a bit of an update, or not an update, like a feedback on, am I doing enough? And just ask. If you don't know if you're doing enough, just ask.
Yeah, again, great advice on that front. And then I think a really interesting question that came through the survey was that often people struggle to kind of identify and recognize stress, and especially what it might be that is stressing them out. And some people said they don't know when they're stressed until they are actually unwell. So I guess this is a two-part question. What can we look for, and then how can we kind of be preventative and be proactive in terms of catching it early and making sure that it doesn't get to that point in the first place?
Yeah, that's quite a difficult thing. I think just being really aware of yourself can be helpful. I mean, sometimes you might notice some of those things I said at the beginning, like the more physical things, the ulcers, the sweating, the not sleeping very well. Like those can be really good indicators of when you're feeling stressed. Obviously, that's a bit annoying because they sometimes come a bit too late. Then if you think about just looking after yourself generally, all those things that, the meditation, the exercise, the looking after yourself, the things that you do for fun, those are things that I suggest you think about every week, every day. Do a little bit of each every day, because that is the stuff that will prevent stress, just by balancing out life, making sure that we're doing things that are going to look after us and nourish us and all these things. And then also it might be helpful to kind of keep a bit of a diary or a journal. If you're really struggling to work out what it is, writing a journal can be so helpful, because then you can look back over it and you'll be like, oh my gosh, yeah, actually, it's every time that question gets brought up that it just makes me really, really anxious and I get really stressed. So I think that can be a really good thing to do, just to be able to kind of reflect and join some dots. And if you're not a person that's very good at that, even just talking about it, or come and speak to somebody like myself, because we're good at that kind of stuff and we can help you out, help find and identify those triggers for you.
And I guess in the short term, sometimes we can identify stress and we can kind of see it coming and stop it. If that's not the case, and if stress kind of strikes, whether it's as small as kind of an anxious thought in the back of our mind, or something more significant like a panic attack, are there any kind of immediate exercises that you would recommend in terms of kind of bringing yourself back down and sort of grounding yourself?
Grounding yourself is such a good phrase, but it's that stuff I talked about with the breathing and the telling yourself, right now everything is fine, right now everything will be okay. Panic attacks are horrendous. They feel like you're about to die. But if you have panic attacks, if you have them regularly, hopefully you know this, that you just have to keep telling yourself, it will pass, it will pass, it will pass, I'm okay, and breathe. But if you've never had one before, honestly, they are horrible. So yeah, it's awful. It's try and tell yourself that, so that you can ground yourself. And it's grounding. It's put your feet on the floor and remember you're on the world. You're doing this today, and you're going to be fine. It's that kind of calm, tricking your breathing tricking your parasympathetic nervous system again, to remind yourself that actually, as much as it feels like everything's going to come to an end, it's all right.
And somebody actually, I've just seen thrown a tip in into the poll, which thank you very much for. They've said a tip for those who kind of wake up worried. If you have a notepad and pen by your bed to note down your thoughts, it gives you the feeling that you've offloaded your thoughts and done something actionable with them. So yeah, that's just a nice one, I guess, if you kind of wake up worrying about the day. I think that kind of takes us through the questions that we've prepared on, Gemma. We do have a few in the poll, so if you would be comfortable maybe taking on a couple of these now, is that something that you're all right with?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I really liked that tip there, but I think on the flip side, if you're somebody that can't stop thinking about things before you go to sleep, writing it down then is also really helpful. Or if you feel like there's stuff that's going on in your mind that you need to deal with, again, making a note of it, and then also dedicating a time in the day. It might be that you go for a run and you just need to think through some stuff, or it might be that you sit down for an hour and you think through some stuff. But dedicating time to be worried and think all this stuff through can help relieve your brain of that immediate sense.
Yeah, I know that's something I definitely do. I've got a whiteboard about 2 feet away from me that's got all of my ramblings on. So yeah, I think that's something that will be really helpful for a lot of people.
Go through the questions.
So one that I think I found really interesting, actually, in terms of switching off when you've got annual leave. I think someone said how to switch off over the weekend or on annual leave. I find myself worrying more about work now that we are working from home. And I think just to add to that as well, if I may, sometimes I personally, when I'm on annual leave, it's the feeling that, most of the other people are in and working. On the weekend, it's different for me because, everyone's off. But, that kind of sense of, I'm here not doing my work and everybody else is. Could you speak to kind of coping with those thoughts?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that. And what I've really picked up on through my client work is that people cope very differently. Some people are really good at, turning off all their notifications for their emails and their social networking stuff for their work and things like that. And that really helps them. Whereas other people actually sitting down for half an hour a day and just checking in, that's the thing that helps them. So I think it's quite an individual thing. And I don't actually think there's anything necessarily wrong with checking in, but I do think, again, with the waking up and writing it down, or it's it's sort of compartmentalizing. Yeah, I think there's something also, distraction can probably be quite a good thing there. Distraction gets quite a bad rap, but I actually think it's got a really good place at the moment, particularly with not a lot going on.
And we've got one, I think, that quite a nice kind of practical one, I guess. In terms of, I know we spoke earlier about kind of recognizing and identifying triggers and especially, like you said, writing stuff down, and if you notice something that's coming through in a pattern, if it's something that is work related, do you have kind of a next step in terms of when you recognize a trigger? Somebody's asked, should we tell a manager when we realize that a certain work topic is kind of a trigger for that stress?
As a rule, I would say yes, like as a rule of thumb. But I do think that it can be quite dependent on what it is. Majority of the time, when these kinds of things come up, my kind of opinion or advice, not that I really give advice as such, is to communicate it. And as I said earlier, like, you'd be surprised at just how honest you can be. I think maybe as Brits even, but we tend to think that other people can't handle our honesty or our stuff, whereas actually most of us are quite good people, so our honesty isn't going to be that bad. So actually it might be quite helpful to say, I'm trying to think of a sort of hypothetical situation, but actually, what, it really makes me nervous when you make me present about this stuff. It's creating a lot of stress for me. Do you think we could do something about that, or do you think we could talk about that and see maybe how we might problem solve? I think maybe acknowledging that you are willing to do something, almost sort of compromise with it, but you're coming together collaboratively rather than feeling like you have to solve this all on your own.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I realise now we've got about 45 seconds before we've hit our 30-minute time limit. But yeah, I think that's a really nice way to round it off. That, you know, a lot of the time being open about these things, that there is a way to kind of be collaborative in the workplace, and especially I like to think in our workplace. So yeah, I guess I just want to end on saying a massive thank you to you, Gemma. I know I found that really, really, really insightful, and a lot of practical tips as well, which is always a benefit. And I hope, you know, the same can be said for everyone that joined us. So yeah, thank you for coming along today, and thank you to everyone who joined. And yeah, I guess that brings us to a close. And just to say, any questions or comments that I didn't touch on from the Slido poll, we will be sending those over to Gemma, and Gemma can kind of feedback to us on those, and we'll get you a response.
Yeah, no problem. And it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. And yeah, everyone, I hope you have a lovely rest of your Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you. All of you guys too. Enjoy yourselves.
Cheers, Gemma. See you later.
Thanks.